Okay, let's dive into this explainer and uncover the deeply unsettling, grotesque truth behind the world's most famous mythological figure. When we hear the name Heracles, or Hercules, we almost immediately picture the ultimate ancient superhero, right? A glorious demigod with bulging muscles, triumphing over evil monsters to protect the innocent. But what if I told you that this widely accepted image is, well, basically just a sanitized fairy tale? Today, we're going to strip away the beautiful heroic legend to reveal a deeply dark historical mystery. We are talking about a horrific tragedy of divine brainwashing, brutal family slaughter, and a truly agonizing end. It's a pretty jarring thought, isn't it? I mean, was the world's greatest hero actually just an expendable pawn? Could he really have been acting of his own free will? Or was he simply a disposable piece trapped in an incredibly cruel game played by the absolute powers of the gods? Well, we're going to dig into the original mythological sources to investigate exactly that. Part 1. The Hero's Dark Truth. To really understand this, we need to break down his life into a sort of tragedy. And this brilliantly illustrates just how cruel that downward spiral really was, mapping out a path of inevitable doom engineered entirely by fate. We start in Act 1 with the illusion of glory, which quickly spirals into Act 2, the horrific madness induced by the goddess Hera. That leads straight into Act 3, the brutal reality of his 12 labors of slavery, before hitting rock bottom in Act 4, the poisoned tunic. Part 2. Madness and family slaughter. It is absolutely crucial to understand that Heracles didn't just snap under pressure. This wasn't some sudden natural mental break. What we are looking at is engineered trauma, a divine mind control resulting in the ultimate taboo. The goddess Hera, who held absolute power and was fueled by blinding, raging jealousy over Heracles' very existence, literally forced a terrifying delusion upon his mind. The sheer horror of this reality is it's hard to even overstate. Under this divine madness, Hera warped his vision so completely that he didn't even see his own family standing before him. He believed his loved ones were monstrous enemies. And in a desperate, deluded attempt to defend himself, this invincible warrior brutally murdered his own wife and children with his bare hands. He was transformed into a mad killer by the very gods who supposedly watched over the world. Part 3. The 12 Labors of Slavery. Let's move to his famous labors and see how this builds, because the reality fundamentally changes how we view his most famous adventures. Now, what's really interesting here is the massive gap between the pop culture myth and the actual source reality. The pop culture myth feeds us this narrative of glorious adventures, willingly fighting monsters for justice and eternal glory. But the source reality? It's far darker. These weren't heroic quests. It was forced slave labor under an unreasonable king, specifically to atone for slaughtering his family. It completely frames the hero as a tragic prisoner serving a brutal, lifelong penance. Part 4. Deianira and the Centaur. Having survived his enslavement, you might think the guy earned a peaceful life, right? Actually, scratch that. Tragedy was still waiting. Let's shift our focus to his third wife, the tragic figure of Deianira, and a fateful encounter with a centaur. She wasn't just anybody. She had a deeply royal background. She was the daughter of Caledonian king Oeneus and queen Althea, and sister to Meleager and Melanippe. But her marriage to Heracles started in absolute violence. She was won by Heracles in a violent clash against the river god Achelous. This bloody beginning basically set the stage for the rest of their doomed relationship. So the crucial point to understand right now is this stuff, the Hydra's poison. During his labors, Heracles had slain the monstrous Hydra and kept its venom. And this wasn't just a toxin that makes you feel a bit sick. We are talking about an entirely incurable, highly corrosive venom that literally melts flesh and bone. Understanding how lethal this was is super vital, because while Heracles and Deianira were crossing the river Enonos, the centaur Nessos attempted to assault her. Heracles immediately shot Nessos with an arrow soaked in this very poison. But as the centaur Nessos lay dying, with this flesh-melting poison coursing through his veins, he committed one final act of malicious revenge. He whispered a devastating lie to Deianira. "My blood is a love potion." It's incredibly tragic. As he dies from the Hydra's poison, the centaur weaponizes Deianira's desperate, good-intentioned desire to save her marriage, planting a seed that would destroy the world's greatest hero. Let's walk through exactly how this fatal sequence unfolded years later. Step 1. Heracles goes to war and takes the beautiful princess Iole as a captive, sparking deep, entirely understandable jealousy in Deianira. Fearing she was losing her husband, we move to step 2. Deianira remembers the centaur's words and secretly coats a tunic in what she believes is a love potion. She had absolutely no idea she was handling a literal flesh-melting bioweapon. And finally, step 3. The unsuspecting servant Lycus delivers this doomed garment to the hero. Part 5. A grotesque, fiery end. This brings us to the final, horrifying chapter of his life. The invincible warrior defeated not by a titan, but by his own melting flesh. The moment Heracles puts on that tunic, the tragedy reaches a terrifying climax that modern retellings almost always skip. The tainted tunic, activated by the warmth of his body, instantly fuses to his skin. The original mythological texts describe an absolute living hell. As he desperately tries to rip the garment off, chunks of his own muscles and bone tear away right along with it. Driven mad by pain, he throws himself into a funeral pyre while Deianira hangs herself in grief. Unable to die by normal means because of his demigod status, he realizes his end has come, so he builds a pyre and throws himself into the flames alive just to escape the torture. And back home, upon hearing the grotesque outcome of her innocent attempt to save their love, Deianira is consumed by unbearable guilt and ends her own life. A complete, total dual tragedy. Part 6. Hero or expendable pawn? So we really have to look back at the dark, tragic reality we've just uncovered. From the engineered madness that forced him to kill his kids, to the decades of slave labor, and finally a horrific death caused by his own poisoned arrow coming back to haunt him. Heracles had unrivaled strength, right? He was the absolute pinnacle of human and divine power. Yet his entire life was essentially a script written by jealous deities and cruel destiny, inevitably leading to his ruin. Which leaves us with this final thought. Even with overwhelming power, can anyone truly escape the cruel games of fate?